morning, and welcome to the March 17, 2017 edition of Issues That Matter. My name is Robert Piccone. I'm your host, and I have the pleasure today of having a guest co-host, someone that you might be somewhat familiar with, Catherine Ann Mossman Wilson, I'm sorry. I did it. I told you I'd mess
It's
it up.
all right. You're fine. You're fine.
Catherine Ann Mossman Wilson. Catherine, welcome back.
Glad to be here. Thank you. Happy St. Patty's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day to you, too. And our guest today is Jennifer Wiesner, who is an LCSW, and you're going to have to explain this one.
Oh, I will.
AASECT sex therapist.
Yes, the American.
My opening question would be, what is an AASECT?
It's a mouthful, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It's the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, and that's the credentialing body for my sex therapy certification.
Aren't you one of 5 sex therapists in the entire state of Maine?
Yes, yes. And I was the only female in 2012 when I was certified for a while until 3 of my colleagues became certified. So there are 4 women and 1 gentleman.
Wow.
Yeah.
What brought you to this particular aspect of therapy?
When I was living in New Jersey, I worked with youth and little children, and then when I moved up here, I wanted my kids to kind of know this Maine lifestyle and this beautiful way of living. And I moved up here, and for a while I did some community work, and then I started working in a private practice with a colleague mom, and we worked with adolescents, and that was wonderful and great, and I wanted to expand into some couples work, and I got invited to a training, and I would say I'm a social worker, so I didn't even know what the training was about. I was just so glad to be going with some colleagues. And it turned out to be a well-known sex therapist out of Cambridge, Mass, Gina Ogden. And she was talking at Hardy Girls, Healthy Women on the intersection of spirituality and sexuality. And in my growing up, those 2 things were never in the same universe. And so I was so interested, but I also felt like I was getting the flu. I was sweating. I was raising my hand for everything. And I just knew whatever she was doing, I had to be doing. And it turns out this is where the whole epiphany and happenstance happened. The one gentleman sex therapist in the state saw me. We ended up chatting, and he said, you know, whatever's happening today, you seem like you are so interested and invested. I said, I am. I said, I don't even know what this is, but whatever she's doing, I want to be doing it. And he said, I'm the only certified sex therapist in the state. How about someday when I retire, you take this all over from me?
Wow. Wow.
So after that, I truly believed in what an epiphany is, because in that moment, I thought I was going to throw up, and I felt weepy, and I just knew this was it. And I said yes. I hadn't consulted my husband. I had babies at home, but I knew whatever this path was, I was called to it. It wasn't work that I wanted to do. I knew whatever it is, I have to do it. And I started a 4-year certification and supervision and all kinds of education all over the U.S. to get that. And it's been the most rewarding work of my life.
He essentially handed it off to you.
He did. He's still working. But at that point, he was thinking ahead and knew that eventually I'll retire and that he needed someone to pass that torch on to.
What does the bulk of your practice consist of?
To people who find me online, they know me in a couple different ways. One, that I'm a couples therapist, and that I'm a sex therapist. And for me, as a couples therapist, I don't know how they're intimately connected. And so for me, any couple that's coming in, we're also going to be talking about sexuality, intimacy, healthy relationships, and also then the medical aspect, individuals who are coming in with medical issues, whether it's erectile dysfunction or it's female genital pain, if it's pelvic pain, all of those types of things. So I'm known in those 2 areas as a couples therapist and as a sex therapist, and how they come together. And then a lot of more people know me about my Raising Sexually Healthy Children workshop series, and also doing private consultations with parents who they call me up and say, I just found pornography on my 10-year-old's tablet. What do I do? And those types of things. And I help talk them through that and meet with them around healthy sexuality.
That is the thing that, well, first of all, I was talking to my husband before I came here, and I said, Charlie, I think this is the most important interview that I've participated in on Issues That Matter. We've had cyber safety for kids, just many things around prevention of child sexual assault, which I think all the most of the big issues in our society can be linked back to the traumatization of our children and the prevention side. And it's wonderful to talk about don't have sex with children, and if you see something, say something, and all that. But behind that, there are so many confused parents. I get so many questions, and I'm not a sex therapist, but I get so many questions about, fathers talking about, how old does my daughter, can I snuggle with her on the couch and watch TV? I have mothers asking me, my daughter's 10 and she wants to take a shower with me today, this morning. Is that okay for me to, when do I, there's like all these questions. And so I was so excited. And I know that your workshops are like 2 hours long and that you don't cover everything in 2 hours. And we have about 45, 50 minutes today. So we're not going to cover everything. But I love to play the devil's advocate and just sort of channel all these questions that I've heard and just ask you, when, with healthy sexuality with children, when is the age that we start talking to our children about good touches and bad touches? And we hear so often in my sex trafficking work about children calling their vagina a cupcake, and then the child's trying to report that somebody's touching their cupcake and they don't understand because they're calling it a cup. So from the beginning, when we have our children, isn't that when the whole sexual education starts, when they're toddlers and we start calling their body parts their body parts? I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Definitely, you're right on with that. My mantra has been for the past couple of years is to reduce the shame in Maine, because shame gets...
Reduce the shame in Maine. Bumper sticker.
I know.
I love that.
Reduce the shame in Maine.
Reduce the shame in Maine.
And I really feel, and here's the egomaniacal part of me, I feel like through this work, we can change the world. And how that is because every time that we inform children, educate them, and prepare them for what's happening in their body, how to be with other people, how to be in stranger situations, we are preparing them about how they can be in the world as a sexual being. And that can start, actually I've had pregnant women come to my workshops, which I love. They're already thinking about that because I say parents should be one step ahead, always one step ahead, because all of a sudden that stage will creep up on you.
Right.
And so when you were right on with the toddlers, we want to be teaching them right from the get-go. I had one woman ask me, well, why do you say your workshops are from birth to age 8 and then 9 to 14? And I say, because it starts at birth, the way that we hold our children, the way that we clean their bodies and we touch them as they're valuable and worthy, all those are really important. It's how we show love and affection.
Because there are people who are uncomfortable changing an infant's diaper.
Right.
A man who's changing his little daughter's diaper, and she has bowel movement everywhere, and you need to clean her vulva and her rear end and make her clean. And they're really uncomfortable, like, oh my gosh, I hope this is okay. So in that energy of sort of freaking out, how can that child not feel?
Right, and you're talking about that sort of, and not in a woo-woo way, but that energetic feeling. We know when people, the way that they respond to us, their touch, their hesitancy, we feel that. And so if we can be present with our children, look at their bodies as amazing, positive machines.
Because they are
Because
amazing.
they are. And that brings me to, we'll go back to that in a second, but I'm just remembering, the reason I wanted to do this is because I have kids of my own, and I truly do believe the ripple effects of this work, it helps in delaying onset of first sexual behavior. We know that for dads who are what we call, have daughters that are well fathered and they can talk openly about subjects, particularly sexuality, that helps in their relationships, their marriages, their finances, their education, like it goes way out there. And so I really felt like when I started this work, it was really important to not do what has been done historically, which has been the negative aspects. If you don't teach this to your child,
something awful is
something
going to
terrible will happen.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, we know that parents want to protect their children, but how can we protect them, again, from a positive place? And I heard this, or I found this quote on the internet when I was researching my workshops years ago. And it was a light bulb for me. And here's the essence of it. And it was, if we want to teach children to act responsibly with their sexuality, we need to teach them how amazing it is. And children who have an intuitive understanding of how amazing sexuality is and their body is, they will not tolerate when sexual behavior feels coercive or manipulative or dangerous. Yeah. So see how it's coming from the opposite perspective. We want to build that muscle inside of our children of health, of well-being, of positivity, instead of teaching fear. Because that has the ripple effect of, I hear from lots of young people and I hear from mothers my age and younger, I learned how to say no because it was always no. But no one taught me how to say yes.
And when to say yes.
And when to say yes. And if we are teaching, like I said, building that muscle of that your body is valuable and wonderful and amazing, we're coming from a place of positive.
And that starts right from when we have these little beings, these
Yes,
little kids.
exactly.
We have these babies and how we interact with them if we're nursing.
Mm-hmm.
Can't tell you, my children are in their 30s. Yes, I'm that old. And I remember being in Kansas just nursing and how I'm totally covered,
Mm-hmm.
like more covered, way more covered than a bathing suit, like way.
You were in a tent.
I was in a tent, And I spent, much of the first year with both children, when we would visit other people, including relatives, I was spending it time in their bathroom. I got very well accustomed with it because people were so uncomfortable with just knowing what was going on behind the blanket. Never mind, cleaning children.
Right. And a lot of that has, I say we have our adult hat on about sexuality. And what we know about children is they don't have all that baggage. They don't bring that to the equation. They are curious, they are ready, they are open, and they can be very scientific about it and very literal. And so when I'm educating parents in my workshops, I always say there's sort of a formula of how to bring information to them. And one of the parts is that never go more than 2 sentences. That you've lost your child at that point. You just want to keep it brief, because some parents, we feel like this is the moment, this is the sex talk, like we have to talk, and so they go overboard. Mm-hmm. And what I say is try to resist that. These should be tiny little bits that they can digest over over their whole childhood lives.
So on the age appropriate thing. So one of the things that we do is getting grown-ups comfortable with a little beautiful, amazing body, and feeling comfortable in changing a diaper, and being comfortable with bathing a child, an infant and toddler. And then from that toddler place, there are books that you've brought here. So they're very age specific. So if you're uncomfortable or you don't know what to say, or they haven't attended one of your workshops, which I highly recommend, they can buy some of the books. Now tell us, because there were specific people that you really liked. So let's go toddler. So one of the things with toddlers that I use in my talk, when people will say, well, what can we do? How can we work around the prevention? I say, teach your child to honor their body, honor their own inner knowing. And if you go over to a friend's house, or family comes to your house and they want to pick up your toddler and hold them, sometimes grown-ups will just hand over the child, here, or the child's like, I don't want to, oh, don't be shy, hand them over, rather than letting the child sort of own that they don't want to be touched. And I said, well, why don't you do a handshake, or a fist bump, or a high five? Right. Yeah. She doesn't want to be touched right now. And right out of the gate, start teaching that child that it's okay to not be touched. And I suggest books. You have so much great information to share. So for the toddler, do you have something that you can tell us?
Can I just build on what you said? Because I think I think what people or parents don't always, in that moment, recognize is that you're kind of scrambling a child's brain. We're teaching them, most parents are teaching their child that their body belongs to them, right? And then all of a sudden you're saying you have to go kiss Aunt Sally, or you have to be hugged by Uncle Billy, or whatever it is. And you can, in a child's literal
mixed
brain,
message.
That's a mixed message. And here's what it actually plays out is, the mixed message is, your body is yours except when someone in authority tells you otherwise.
Exactly.
And that's
Ding,
where
ding,
we,
ding, ding,
red
ding,
flag,
ding,
that's where we run into problems. And so we can teach consent to children from the age of 2. There's some great articles out there that I give to my participants. And what we want to teach them is, again, about their own body, able to touch their own body, that they can celebrate their own body through exploration and touch, but we don't have the right to touch anyone else's body because it belongs to them. So the same thing with then, here, hand off your child to someone that she doesn't want to be held by. That's a mixed message for them. So about the books, thanks for letting me build on that. I just brought a little smattering because otherwise I'd have to bring a truck of all the ones that I have. And the one thing that I also mentioned to all participants, because I have, all types of parents coming to my workshops.
You've had like over 500 people.
I'm about at 500.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it's in less than 2 years, and that's just doing it formally. Before that, I was doing them sort of informally at town halls, and so it's more than that. But I'm counting that sort of formality of having, I have this, I do my PowerPoint with raising sexually healthy children, but. With the books, I always tell parents to remember that not every one book is going to represent the creative and diverse landscape of your home and your family. And so, but parents want a place to start. Like, okay, great. How do I start?
Yeah.
And so I'm a big believer in, if you are starting when they are young, you definitely want to start. If you're uncomfortable having these conversations, starting with a book that will guide you. So I recommend the Roby Harris series, and It's Not the Stork is the first one. The second one in the pile is It's So Amazing, and then It's Perfectly Normal. So this book is for 4 to 7 years old. It's So Amazing is for 7 to 10 years old, and then the It's Perfectly Normal are the puberty years from 10 to 14.
And that just sort of get the conversation going.
Yes, and I'll tell parents, read the book yourself first, because a lot of the information that's out there, and this is another reason when I started doing these workshops, something that I saw was, not that it's missing, but it's a little bit harder to find. And there's all these books that'll tell you what to say, how to say it, but one piece that isn't always included is, how do we get to that point? What if I grew up with no template for sharing information? What if I grew up in a very religious, restrictive environment? What if my parents were very permissive and that didn't feel good? There's all the what ifs. And if we haven't really checked in with our own values around these issues, we're going to be unsure when we're giving information. I will tell parents, especially in the older group, at some point your child most likely will come to you and ask you a question about your experience. When did you first when did you first kiss someone? When did you first have sex? When should I do that? If you haven't explored your values or your baggage around that stuff, it's going to make it hard to impart information. So I would say that's the pre-work. That's the pre-work as a parent, and if you're parenting as a joint, as a couple, you got to make sure that you're bringing, there's one parent that may have this experience growing up, the other one had this experience. How do we bring those values together? In some households, one parent will say, I am not doing this. You're on your own.
Right.
Some will do that. And what I say is, let's celebrate that. Like, okay, you get to share what you want. But it's really best, if you're going to be parenting together, to have an idea of what are the messages that are most important that you want to bring on.
Do you find the receptivity on the part of the parents to what you're speaking of is a function of how they grew up, or where they grew up, or when they grew up?
Sure, definitely. I think it all influences that, the nurture part of that, definitely. Because, like I said, if you grew up in a restrictive, really, whether it's religious or just taboo, we don't talk about these things. I've worked with someone who told me that the men in the home were not allowed to empty garbage when one of the girls in the house had their menstrual cycle, because that's dirty. What is that? As you grow, what does that teach you?
Yeah.
And so I hear all kinds of stories about that. So it colors your view. And so I ask people, check in with that stuff. Is what you received, that's also a question I ask in my workshop, is what you received as a parent, is it what you want to share with your child? If it's not, they deserve more.
And the timing it takes, like how long is your workshop? How many hours?
It's 2.5 hours, but we always go over, and I always call it the drive-through of sex education, because we'll never cover it all.
So I was thinking about how many hours I spent getting my hunting license. how many hours I spent, right? How many hours that I spent learning my Apple computer at the Apple store. Yeah. How many classes I took. Concealed weapon permit, how many hours that I spent on that. Or, you know what I mean?
Believe me, more than you know.
just so much. And I think, boy, this is really, it doesn't take that long to educate ourselves.
To get enough
education.
You are able to, it's a primer, and I always say it's enough for you to jump off to say, okay, this book looks like it fits the landscape of my family. Now I know how to use the four-prong approach to asking questions and giving information. Like, they'll have what they need. And you're right on with that. You can imagine how I feel about it. I feel like, I know when I was nursing my children, I also had some critical illness during that time, and I was concerned that I wouldn't be able to nurse after that illness, and having the research that I did around that, the research we do for an orthodontist, for a dentist, for a pediatrician, for finding a swim instructor, like all these things we do. And for me, I'm like, hey, this is a critical aspect of parenting, because like we talk about drugs and alcohol with kids, this is for me, as important, if not more, than those topics, but somehow it gets left out and left to chance. And I always say to parents, is this really something you want to leave to chance in the sort of the climate that we're in with regards to readily available information?
Children are going to learn one way or the other. They're going to learn something. They're going to absorb information. As a parent, I would like to think that in the raising of our child, we had an influence, a heavy influence, as to what information we imparted to them.
Yeah.
And if we did not deem it appropriate, then either we were wrong or society was wrong. One of the two. The parent has a responsibility of making that decision.
Well, and you're so right about that. Your first statement, which was, they're going to get it somewhere. And that's why I started doing this work too, is because if their first entree is in 5th grade, quite often with many schools, but more so public schools than private schools, but if their first entree is 5th grade, many have been exposed to pornography. They're getting it on the bus. Kids ride the bus in 5th grade with older kids. They're getting this long before. So we want to position ourselves as parents as their source. And here's the thing that I think for me is really important too, that I really say in a strong voice to parents is, you have one thing that you can give your children that nobody else can. And you just brought that up, Robert, about values. And if you want your values, and if you want your child to sort of have a bird's eye view into your compass and how that you want them to live, you have to get to them early with your values, because they will find it from television, music, pornography, the bus, other children, wherever. But they will find it, and it's happening earlier and earlier.
I will also say that, and I say this frequently, I am so happy that I did not grow up in today's world. Because the messages, mixed messages, wrongful messages, they're bombarded with them every day.
They are. And you know what, though? I'm there to sort of put a warm blanket on that and say, yes, that is all true. But again, if we can, that quote that I mentioned about teaching them that their body is of value, and the values around that, and what we can teach them positively, we can bring these topics up with them. It's actually not that difficult to tackle topics such as assault, rape, HIV, disease with them, because we can just explain it for what it is without all the baggage around that. And then they'll ask questions. But we can do that, and it doesn't have to be so scary.
In a kind, informative way.
Right.
I get that I'm not the norm, so I'll just say that out of the gate. I understand that my history of abuse that most of the people know about, so I get that. But in my middle-income family in the 70s, I was born in 1964, that was right when women started going to work. So Mom had been a homemaker for a while, and then went and got a job, and she was gone. But in my house, Playboy was on the coffee table. Not like the Penthouse and the other stuff, but my father, they thought that Playboy was just okay to have on the dining room, on the coffee table. My parents wouldn't shut the door after they took a shower. They would be naked in the bedroom getting dressed. They didn't walk around the house, but you could see them naked, and that was okay. But I remember looking at the Playboy women and looking at my mom and looking at myself, all very different, and then making up my mind then about what I wanted to look like, and then that was my value. That was like, okay, well, I want to look like that. And in fifth grade, when we were learning about sex education, it wasn't about consent or non-consent. It was just sort of biological information,
right.
And there wasn't a sense of boundaries. And then, of course, my mom was a younger mother, and when I was first assaulted, it was, well, we're just not going to talk about that, and it was sort of just pushed aside. And when anything happened, it was just like a be quiet, and we're just going to pretend that didn't happen and move on, And as someone who was sexualized and victimized as a child, when I had my own children, I was freaked out. I was like, how am I going to prevent my children? And at that time, my children are in their 30s now. They're grown-ups, and now I have grandchildren and grandbabies. So for me, it was No, the Little Seal. So I would play these little Christian cartoon things in the cassette tapes, because that's what we had in the car. And so we'd play cassette tapes of children's stories, but a part of the children's stories were also the prevention. What do you say if someone tries to touch you? No, the Seal had a whale uncle who was inappropriate and how he handled that. So I tried to just make that a part of our everyday life, and making sure that I called a vagina, a penis, a penis. And my in-laws were having a heart failure, because that was just not okay in Kansas, in a farm, born-again Christian family. And then even on the Christian retreats for women, you have to be a good wife and you must submit to your husband. But there was no detail, there was no information about what, how do you talk to your son when he's waking up with an erection, and he's 7 years old, and look, Mom, look at this, I can pee really far away, and if you immediately are freaked out and shameful, well, what is
the message, and what is that energy that you're sending? This is bad, this is shameful, this is dirty, it's whatever, and their mind is left to sort that out.
Right, and so there's like all of these interesting messages, and then of course what we see on our commercials and television and cable now, and the whole thing, then and now, and Robert was saying, I'm glad I'm not raising children now, but then and now we are just influxed with all of this confusing information that can scramble the kid's brain. And what I love is that our children are wet cement. And no one else can mold them. No one else will have the ability to mold them the way we get to. This is the thing that we are.
That's if we do it.
That's if we do it. You're right.
And fear keeps us from doing that. And that's why I started doing these workshops of letting people know, guess what? This isn't scary. It's fun. I've done all dad workshops. It was one of the best.
All dad?
Yes, the best workshop I ever did. And I did it at Otto's in Yarmouth over pizza and beer.
Seriously?
And they have a screen up there. I did the whole PowerPoint.
Oh my gosh.
They were so invested and so interested, and I did a lot of the focus on father-daughter relationship because of the literature that's out there about the well-fathered daughter, and it was amazing.
Tell me about the I probably, not probably, I have gotten more questions from men asking me about their adolescent daughters than I have.
Speak to a little bit of that.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear that.
It's, adolescence is a time where, we hear about it all the time. Our daughter is coming into puberty, and what happens? Father tends to step back. And what we know is it's actually a time in their lives where they need dads to step forward. So they need to deal with just what is the values that are popping up for me? What is that baggage that's popping up for me? What is keeping me from staying close with my daughter? So maybe the snuggling on the couch will look a little bit differently. Maybe it'll be, let's go out and have lunch together. Let's go out and kick a ball together. Let's go, drive to the beach together. Maybe the togetherness will look a little different, but what we know is that when a father stays invested in that way, all these trickle down that comes out of that. And it's very powerful. Like I said, with regards to relationships, marital partners, education, finances, career, all of that stuff, there's studies that show that it can be influenced. And so with adolescents, we just need dads to hang in there. I sit with couples who end up coming in and talking about parenting around this stuff, as you can imagine, a lot. And what I'll suggest is, even if the mother, who, as we know, mothers tend to drive the bus with regards to sex education for their kids. Statistically, they are the ones who are doing it. And so that's my other call to action is, if we don't bring dads more into this picture, how are young girls ever supposed to relate to the other gender? Because statistically, the majority of young girls will be in relationship with the other gender. And so how are they ever going to learn that?
Because they're going to pick, like, girls are going to pick someone like their dad, right? Is that
There's
that
all kinds of theory about that.
Is that a myth?
Good, bad, or indifferent? No,
Yeah.
it's not a myth. It's actually, it depends. There's all kinds of theory, and I have I follow a certain type of theory that there are aspects of, I always say you marry some aspect of your parent. And so yes, and that could be good or not so good.
Yeah.
And so what we know is, when a dad hangs in there and really supports their young daughter through their young adulthood, but in through puberty and on up, great things can happen. So really important. So that's why I started doing Dads Only. I have another one on April 28th, but
April 28th, Dads Only.
April 28th in my office space. And like I said, make it fun. This is not a scary thing. And actually, like I said, those dads were more feverishly writing and invested and connecting with each other, even more so than the women, that often come to my workshops. I have couples that come to the workshop, which to me, if you're co-parenting, I'll say, this is cheaper than a night out for dinner. Is this not worth it?
Right.
I always say it's as important as breathing. It's important as, in Maine, swimming. You got to teach your kid to swim.
How to swim, right.
And so for me, it's that important. And it's
So Amy Schumer, I was at a HubSpot convention last year, and Amy Schumer's not my sort of favorite go-to, but I was at this convention, and she was the entertainment, and so I went, and some of it I was just like, I don't want to hear this, but she did say something that really jumped out at me. She said that she was giving her niece, toddler, a bath. Mm-hmm. And it was time to wash her vagina, and the little girl, her vulva. So the little girls, trying to wash her, and Amy was saying, I went to wash her vulva, and I thought, am I a predator right now? Am I?
Think of these
right?
thoughts that
right,
people have.
right. And so she was, with comedians, sometimes they speak about what is, reality for us. So just to go back, taking a course and getting comfortable with our own body and with the bodies of our children, and understanding and sharing energetically the magnificence of the human body. Feeling comfortable because we're passing that on to this little infant when we change them, how we react to their bodies, calling their body parts the correct name. Then as toddlers, teaching and honoring the boundaries so we don't scramble their brain on a high five if they don't want to be held or touched by somebody else, if that's okay. Getting the appropriate books and reading them first, and then reading them as a starting place.
Yes.
Like, one book isn't the do-all and
Right.
be-all, but just sort of a starting place. And then continuing our education as they get older with those different series, different phases, you said.
Yeah, we want to scaffold. That's what we want to do. And some of us will be late to the party. I would say, if you're tardy to the party, just apologize to your kid. Say,
So if your child's 14 and you haven't done any of
Exactly.
this.
It's not lost, because some people will come to the workshop and I can see they're anxious, and I'll say, if you're tardy to the party, here's what you want to
If
say.
you're tardy to, you've got some interesting quips. End the shame in Maine.
Reduce the shame in Maine.
Reduce the shame in Maine.
Because I won't end it, but reducing it. But if you're tardy to the party, this is what I suggest to people. Really go for that heart-connected approach that you want with your kids. And it's, hey, I went to this workshop tonight, and you know what I realized? I realized that there are things that I haven't been talking about with you because I didn't have parents that did that for me. And because I didn't have that, I didn't know I should be doing it with you. But what I do know is I love you so much, and this is as important as talking about drugs or alcohol. I taught you how to brush your teeth, I taught you how to swim, ride a bike, that this is that important. And so even though it makes me feel a little uncomfortable, I care about you that much that I'm going to sit in that discomfort. And I know it might make you uncomfortable a little bit, but that's how important it is. And so that's, let them see our humanity, let them see that parents can apologize, which I think is huge,
Right.
and say, I know something, I learned something, and now I'm going to share it with you because I love you that much.
So I was watching something, it was a TED Talk. I think it was Selma. There's a Selma House, I'm probably not saying that right, for sex trafficking survivors. And the speaker was doing a TED Talk the other day, and I was watching that, and she was talking about where boys learn about sexuality.
Pornography.
Pornography.
It's the number one source of, I hate to even put those in the same sentence, but research lately, literature is showing that the number one source of sexuality education, I hate to say that word, is from pornography.
Right.
With as early as, it's even earlier because I hear about it all the time, but generally around 10 years old.
I was going to say, I'm hearing middle school.
Yeah.
So when I talk to parents that have boys in high school who haven't had these conversations yet, thinking that they're too young, or my son's just really immature for his age, I'm thinking you are really missing a golden opportunity.
Because they believe that innocence is lost if we share this information with our children. And let me tell them, for parents, innocence is lost when they get it on the playground, when they get it from older kids. Pornography, that's where innocence is lost.
Right.
And so this actually preserves that. It gives them factual, age-appropriate information that they can digest and come back to you with. Like whether they have more questions, you give them information, and then after 2 sentences you check in. Does that answer your question? Does that make sense to you? If they have more questions, great, they're ready. If they look at you glazed over and say, can I go play Legos? You know that they're done.
Right.
And that's okay.
I
didn't know if you wanted me to just show some of these resources.
Please do.
Because I think you and I are right. This certainly warrants, more time
and
maybe
more
some of the most
conversation.
common questions that parents have in a later show.
Well, can I just ask a couple quick questions?
Sure.
Just because I want my audience, our audience, to have some takeaway.
Sure.
So one of the things I want to know is, what does a mother say to her young, I'll say 8, 9, 10-year-old boy when he's waking up with erections? I get asked that a lot. What do they say?
And again, that's where I feel like this is their right to know what happens to their body. And I had to do this for my sons and let them know that there's something called a nocturnal emission, or just erections in the night, and it's your body getting ready to grow into the next stage and into adulthood eventually. So what's happening to your penis, and that's where you can stop and say, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Stop there.
Yeah, because
if they
2
ask more,
sentences.
Yeah, and if they ask then, but how does that do that? Well, blood, there's 2 things here, because we also want to let them know something else that's really important. One, that there could be arousal depending on the age, and that's normal. Their body, they're a sexual being, and they're growing into puberty, and their feelings are starting to feel, you're starting to feel arousal. But then the other piece is sometimes our body just does that, and why that's really important is there are times when children are victimized, and they did, whether it's become erect or feel some sort of pleasure, and they live lifelong guilt and just guilt and shame about that. And so we also want to let them know that sometimes our body just does that. Like a spontaneous erection, when you go to the blackboard, we don't have blackboards anymore, I dated myself.
Right.
Go up to, they do to go to whiteboards,
Yeah.
and they're putting something up there, and that can happen. We need to teach our kids that that is normal. Your body is just growing and changing, and that teaching them skills around managing that, because you and I have talked about this. When that happens to a boy, it's that fight or flight, and they're no longer in their front brain, they're back in their amygdala. They lose the ideas of what am I supposed to do in this moment. So giving our kids ideas. Wrap a sweatshirt around yourself before you go up to the board. If you're at a swim party, make sure you always have a towel nearby that you can sit on your lap. But helping them with not only scripts about how to handle things, but also the actions and behaviors that can make them feel less embarrassed. But knowing that these are normal things that happen to our body. And these books are great for explaining all of that.
And that's the thing that I get with adult men who were victimized in their adolescence is they feel so betrayed by their body. You know,
and that's the phrase.
I'm
It's
thinking,
betrayed, and yet it's an autonomic response.
That's what I say. I say you were 12 years old, the wind blew, and you had an erection. You know, it was Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. It was just a part of being a normal little kid. And they think, oh my gosh, you know, this guy did this to me while I was sleeping. I woke up, and rather than pushing him away, I just sort of froze, and then I had an ejaculation. Does that mean I'm gay? And then
if they had more information
if they would have had more information before that, they would have understood and forgiven their bodies for doing what it normally
just
does.
A response.
Was just
I think bringing up these books is a great idea.
Yes.
And I want to make sure
we have time for that.
We have the time to do that.
Also, when your kids, you know, I talked about the Roby Harris series. I also, for parents, there's so many great ones, but here's two that I've enjoyed. The Sex-Wise Parent by Janet Rosenzweig. I find this is great because it has a lot of information, anatomy, but also scripts and things to talk about with your kids.
What a great resource.
Yeah, a great resource. And it also even covers, you know, abuse, bullying, all those other things. And then Deborah Rothman's Talk to Me First. And, you know, she's saying it. We want children to be, we want to be the askable parent. We want our kids to come to us first.
Right.
So we got to be there. You know, we got to have that door open for them. So that's for parents, just two of the ones. But then when your kids are going into puberty, you also want them to be able to have something that's just for them. The Girls and Boys Body Books by Kelly Dunham. And this is just something that, you know, is mine. You know, this one's for me. It's just about my body. I strongly suggest that, like teaching from the Roby Harris books, these books that I mentioned earlier, these teach about gender, you know, both. You want that. You want kids to understand. I know I want my sons to have an appreciation and understanding and an empathy for the other gender.
Absolutely.
And what they go
and vice
through.
versa.
And that's what I mean. So vice versa.
On the TED Talk, the woman was saying, forgive me, I forgot her name, but she was saying that on the by the time they're adolescent, that middle school time, that there's a part on your smartphone where you as a parent can log on and prevent them from going online. So when the kids take their phone to their bedroom at night, that there's a couple things you can do. One is to keep the phones
downstairs charging. Yes.
Yeah, that's a downstairs charge.
Yeah.
And also to get on your child's phone so the little boy can't, or girl, can't get onto the pornography sites because
there's lots
prevalent.
of monitoring.
It's so easy. There's a monitoring. There's control
there's
device
lots of
on
monitoring software you can get. Like one that I've suggested is Qstodio.
Qstodio.
Yeah, it's like QUSTODIO.com. Okay. And it's a monitoring software up to 5 tablets, and it's like around $50-some for a year.
Nice.
And, you know, on devices, 5 different devices. But it will monitor, and you have different parental controls that you can put on that. But again, that is great. But if you just do that, you're not educating your child about how to make good decisions going forward when you eventually take that off their phone.
Right.
This is the trial time. Here we're putting this on your phone to protect you, and I'm going to teach you the skills of digital citizenship as you grow, and then maybe when you're, depending on when it goes on, 13, 14, 15.
The key being teaching them the values,
yes.
not the actual action, but the values of making the right choice.
Making healthy choices that, you know, fit with your values as a parent, and then at some point they're going to make their own decisions about those things.
Right.
But you know, we as parents have to be.
But they're
there
making the
doing this.
decision from a place of feeling comfortable and honoring their body and having boundaries and having that self-esteem that they're just not going to throw themselves to any boy or let boys go further than they feel comfortable because they've already have that skill set. They've already learned those tools at home, and they have that father-daughter relationship.
Yeah. We want to be teaching them at home. Like I said, school is an amazing safety net. We need it. It's necessary. But it needs to happen earlier with your values on board. That's really important.
So we're kind of get to the end now. I told you it goes by so fast. I have like 100
I know.
more questions.
We didn't even get to like common questions. Another
right.
show.
I know. So do you want to show this book?
This is just the last one. This is by our own Maine, Sandy Karen up at UMO, and this is Birds, Bees, and More. And this is about all the different ways that babies come into families. there's surrogacy, there's donor eggs, there's donor sperm, there's IVF. My first son was an IVF baby. And so, he knows he spent time in a petri dish, and we love that. We laugh about it. But there are parents who have come to my workshops who have said, my son is a donor egg. I'm not his biological mom. How do I talk about that?
Right.
Well, we need resources for that. And I'm so glad that Sandy and her other colleagues came up with this book. So that's a
cool.
great book. And I'm sorry, you asked me something else.
Well, what is like the burning thing that you wanna end, that you really want to leave our audience with now? And like Robert says, we're not one and done. We want you to come back. But for this show, is there something that we haven't touched that you'd really like to?
I don't want to open any can of worms because, like you're saying, we're not one and done. Just like these conversations are not one and done with our kids, this is, can remain open. I still love that quote that I brought up earlier about just helping children develop that positivity within, about worthiness and their amazing bodies, and that's how we teach responsibility around sexuality, not through fear-based education.
I love that.
And these books that I mentioned are so very positive. They really come from a place of just giving information with no values. You insert values as parents.
The comment that you just made about having the children know that the bodies are amazing, I think that's a lesson that a lot of people can learn.
Adults, yes.
People undervalue the wonderment of the human body.
Yes.
The immune system in the human body, I would venture to say that the worst thing a person can do is let's see, how can I say this now? Is not handicap the immune system. The immune system has a remarkable capacity to kill germs, to kill bacteria, if you give it the opportunity to do so.
Right.
And it drives me nuts. I know this is way off topic.
Well, and actually, Robert, it's not, because if we give it the opportunity to do so, and that's what we need to do with our children. We have to stop sort of feeding the myths and believing that our children aren't ready, they're too young, they're going to lose their innocence, it's too much exposure. None of that shows out in the literature. What we know is that the younger and earlier and more age-appropriate the information is, it delays sexual.
You never gave me the opportunity to say what's off topic.
I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
What's off topic is, it drives me nuts when people, they go into a grocery store, they have to lather their hand with antibacterial lotion. You're handicapping your immune system. The immune system needs to be exposed to these bacteria and these germs in order to create the defense mechanism internally. You don't need those lotions and creams. As you use it, you're going to need it more and more. And I've said enough.
But and I'll still go back to, you think you're off topic, but you're not. We need to build from within.
That's right.
And build in health and well-being instead of fear and unhealthiness. So you're still on topic. So I think that's really, really important, is coming from that place.
So on the bottom of the screen that our audience is watching now will be your name and your website where people can reach you. And will you promise that you're going to come back and see us again?
I will,
I have
because
a ton of questions.
Yeah, the questions are my favorite part, and I do scripts with parents, and I love answering them. And it can, as one woman said to me on the street in my town who came to a workshop, she hugged me and she said, "You have no idea how much less anxiety there is between me and my children."
Right.
And she said, "Because now I know how to bring this information to them, and guess what? They totally wanted to hear it." And she hugged me. She said, "I just feel so much less anxiety." And I want that for kids, and I want that for parents.
One of the things that you said that I loved, and I just love this, was I said, when should a father stop snuggling on the couch, or when should they close the bathroom door versus leaving it open and their kids seeing them naked or whatever? And to all those different things, you said, as soon as both people feel awkward, if either one of them kind of like, I don't really want to do that anymore, or that's when.
You have to own that. Let your child lead. That is something I always say. If your child's saying, "I don't want to see you naked anymore," you respect that.
And put some clothes on.
You might want to have a conversation about, is there something about what you're seeing, is that's uncomfortable? Can we talk about that? But on the other end of that, the parent has to own, if they are taking a shower with their child and suddenly they start to feel weird about it, first examine it, because if it's just old baggage, you might be able to move forward with that. But if it's not feeling right, respect that and just say, now I want to start showering. I want my own privacy and my own time. This is my relaxing time.
Yeah.
So
And then
yeah,
you're teaching
honoring
that boundary. If a parent says, that doesn't feel comfortable to me anymore, you're modeling what honoring your own boundaries look
Yes.
like.
Yeah.
I love that. Your work is so easy and common sense and kind and positive.
Thank you.
I love what you do. Please come back. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me,
Thank
both
you.
of you. Thank you.
I learned I can't stand up because the camera will chop my head off.
But you learned a lot.
That has happened in the past. And I was.
We don't want to
thoroughly
behead
reprimanded.
you. We don't want to behead you.
But
This
thank
was
you-
awesome.
Thank you very much for
Awesome.
being a guest on the show.
Really appreciate it. And we have our Wonder
Great
Cups.
information.
Did it feel easy? Was it relaxing, Robert? Was it, did it feel like
Bye.
Okay, folks, have a great day. Enjoy the weather, cold though it may be. It's not snow.
Spring is coming.
Have a great day. Be safe and simplify your life. Bye-bye.